مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين.
Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum and Jummah Mubarak to everybody joining us today. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. My name is Hera Azhar and I am the Communications and Digital Outreach Coordinator here at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. So before we get started today, I'd like to do a little land acknowledgement. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I am joining from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I'm currently located on the land of Huguenot and Powhatan people. If you are unsure whose land you are on and you want to find out, you can visit us at native-land.ca to find out. Sorry, it's not us, but you can visit that website. And thank you all for being here today. It's so good to be back with you all, and I'm so excited to be back on Facebook Live with you today because I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Aliyah Farouk. Aliyah is the Vice Chair of VAIPL's Steering Committee and an active member in the RVA Muslim community. We're so lucky to have her on our team and as another activist in the fight for justice. Hello, Aliyah. How are you?
I'm fine. Salam, Hera. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, too. The Eid preparation is kind of setting in now, so it's a little busy, but I'm doing well and I'm excited. So, Aliyah, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. As you said, I am the Vice Chair for the Steering Committee at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. I'm also a member of the Environmental Justice, the Governor's Committee for Environmental Justice. And I do sit on some other boards in the community as well. For example, Richmond Interfaith Climate Justice League and Seven Hills School. I'm also a mother of 4. I've loved raising my kids here in Richmond, Virginia. We've been here for almost 25 years at this point. I was born and raised not too far from here. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Maryland. So honestly, it's not too different from where I was raised, and it really feels like home. Alhamdulillah.
Good, alhamdulillah. I'm glad to hear that. It's slowly becoming my home too, and I think Richmond is definitely a place that becomes home quick. So yes, so with Eid right around the corner, I thought it was only fitting that we dedicate this episode to the relationships between environmental justice and Islam. So as we've been working a little bit on our water justice campaign here at VAIPL, which you guys will hear a little bit more about throughout this show, I've really started to think more deeply about the connections between water justice and my faith as a Muslim. And so I was hoping we could unpack some of that here today. So Aliyah, I wanted to ask you, what does water justice mean to you?
Water justice to me as a Muslim is an obligation as a Muslim. To use water in a just and equitable manner, it's extremely important. The word water is mentioned in the Quran 63 times, Hira. So that just shows you the importance that our religion gives to water. And I can share a couple of hadiths with you, sayings of the Prophet regarding water. He did say that humans are co-owners in 3 things: water, fire, and pastures, and therefore they must share them. So basically, sharing water is an obligation upon all Muslims. And of course, sharing it equitably is the ideal situation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think from my perspective, I came to water justice a little bit later, and I knew a lot more about other forms of justice. And I think for me, my connection to Islam and water justice comes from just justice, period, in the Quran, and what we learn about being advocates and activists for justice, and implementing that in every single sphere, which includes water and environmental justice. And I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but could you elaborate on what water or water justice, the purpose of it in the Quran and in your worship as a Muslim?
Well, the purpose of it is, it's multi-purpose. We obviously need water to keep ourselves clean, to bathe, to sanitize ourselves. But as Muslims, we also need it to perform wudu, which is something that we do. Ablution prior to every prayer, which is we pray 5 times a day, at least 5 times a day. And because of those hygiene requirements, water is mandatory for all of us, and it's a societal resource for all of humanity. So we do need to share it. And I will share another hadith. Well, actually, I'll share a verse from the Quran, from Surah Anfal. It is said that he who sends down water upon you from the sky with which to purify you. So again, in the Quran, it's stating that we needed to purify ourselves, to keep ourselves clean. And especially during this pandemic, it's become more and more obvious to all of us, not just Muslims, that we really need water to keep ourselves clean and to keep ourselves healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and I think it touches on kind of our discussions about water now as something that is a human right, that every single human should have access to, and not just any water, but like safe and clean water. And I think we see that from the very beginning in the Quran, why that's so important, why that's necessary for every person to have that. And so how do you think that your identity as a Muslim pushes you to advocate for water justice?
Well, again, it's mentioned in the Quran so many times and in the Hadith that we don't have much of a choice but to push for all forms of justice, as you said earlier, but specifically water justice. I can share I can share a few things here with you as well that let me see. I can share another verse from the Quran, and I'm reading from some verses that I copied down so I don't misquote it. But in the Quran, chapter 24, verse 45, God says, "And God has created every animal from water, and then there are some that creep on their bellies, some that walk on 2 legs, and some that walk on 4. God creates what he wills, for verily God has the power over all things." And in another verse in the Quran, chapter 21, verse 30, "The heavens and the earth we join together as one unit of creation. Before we pulled them apart, we made from water every living thing." So as we can see, not only do we need water, but we are created from water. And we as Muslims believe that even God's throne is upon water. So water has an immense importance to us. And as a mother, even from a non-religious perspective, honestly, we need water to cook, to take care of our children. I remember years ago when I first moved to this area, there was an ice storm. And because of that ice storm, which we periodically do get in this area, that was something I wasn't used to growing up in Maryland. We lost electricity first, and we didn't have electricity for 8 days. Then we ended up losing water eventually. First, it was the hot water that went because, of course, we didn't have the electricity to warm it up. And then ultimately, we just lost water. So for the last few days of those 8 days that we didn't have power, not only were we freezing because it was wintertime, but we didn't have access to water. And I was having so much difficulty because I had young children and I needed to feed them. And there wasn't much I could make without access to water. And although it was a tough time in my life, and I know it was tough for all my neighbors here in the Richmond and Chester area, I came to realize that, things that we take for granted, such as water, are so important. And we really need to appreciate that and acknowledge that everybody has the right to these important resources. We are blessed to have them, but many of our neighbors don't always have access to clean drinking water. Obviously, if we have water and it's not clean, it's not going to help us. We can't do much with dirty water, and that is an issue here in the United States and, of course, around the world.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because when you were telling that story, what I'm reminded of is when I visit my family back home in Pakistan, which a lot of, I think, Muslims in the United States are immigrants or child of immigrants. So they have this sort of global relationship as well. When we think about water, we see our families, our neighbors all across the globe not having access to this clean, safe water. And then we see the same thing back at home where we are. So it really shows that all of these environmental justice issues are really connected on the global scale as well. When we think about water, we're talking about, the water in all these other countries, but also the water at home and the water in our neighborhoods and in our communities as well. And that brings me to another point, or a question, I should say. How do you think that Muslim communities here in Virginia and the US can join and empower the fight for environmental justice and water justice?
Clearly, as I said earlier, water and access to clean water is a problem here in the United States. And unfortunately, our neighbors here, especially in Petersburg, are suffering with a water crisis. Years ago, I went to a talk about the environment here in the Richmond area. And I remember one of the speakers saying that Petersburg was predicted to be the next Flint, Michigan. And at that time, the Flint, Michigan issue had just kind of started up. It was horrific then, but what's even more horrific now is that Flint is still suffering from those same issues that they were so many years ago. I think it's been almost a decade at this point that, all these issues in Flint took place with the water. And as a resident of this area, when that speaker said that about Petersburg, it really, really disturbed me to the point where I tried to find that speaker and ask her, because she didn't elaborate on what she meant by that. And I was so disturbed. I tried to find her after she spoke, but unfortunately she had left. And I tried to look into what was going on in Petersburg. I didn't get too much information at the time, but recently we have come to find out that Petersburg has major infrastructure issues. And we do need to deal with that. They are our neighbors. They are our brothers and sisters. And we need to take care of them, and we need to help them in any way we possibly can. Just to give you an idea, Islamically, Islam was established 1400 years ago, approximately. And back then, when they were Muslim rulers in the area of Spain, and they had conquered many areas at that time, there was a water tribunal system, specifically in Valencia. And the water tribunal in Valencia and the irrigation communities in eastern and coastal regions of Spain, there are good examples of the centuries-old Islamic infrastructure established to ensure equitable water distribution systems. Those systems in Valencia are still working till this day. And they are still giving people fair and equitable access to clean water. So that's pretty commendable. That was 1400 years ago. Here we are in the year 2021. So if Islam has given us this example that took place almost 1400 years ago, then yes, today we are obligated to help our friends, not only our neighbors in Petersburg, but even in Michigan. We need to question our lawmakers. We need to find out why our tax dollars are not going to help those who really need this essential resource. So we need to get involved. We need to talk to our lawmakers. And of course, we need to keep the example of our religion, whether that be Islam or Christianity or Judaism. I know for a fact that all Abrahamic faiths preach very similar things. And even the non-Abrahamic faiths, I don't know any religion in the world that would prohibit clean and equitable water distribution. So we, as God-fearing people, need to become more involved, need to question what's going on, why it's not being fixed, and what we as citizens can do to help.
Yeah, I really love that point. I think sometimes we get really caught up in trying to figure out how do we make this thing happen in the now. And what you brought up was really interesting, that so many of these plans and so much of what we need to think about is stuff that has already been implemented that we can return back to, that we have this guidebook, that we have these centuries of guidance to tell us how to go about this and to tell us how to do this, and to tell us how to bring this into our communities. Do you feel like there's been, in your experience, any very effective way of like getting Muslim communities involved, whether it be at the masjid level or at the smaller community level? Has there been any super successful way that you think is able to connect water justice and Islam for broader Muslim communities?
I know for a fact that the Muslim community is definitely aware of what's going on in Flint. That's very far away from us, but we still need to be supportive and helpful. I know the Islamic Circle of North America, also known as ICNA, has till this day been, I think, trying to help, but more than helping with the solution, I know they've been providing clean water through access to water bottles for those families and communities that were affected so deeply in Flint. I'm not sure how much our community here knows about the issues in Petersburg, though, and other localities here that may be dealing with some water issues. And definitely going through the mosque is definitely one way to do that. I know we're really blessed here in Richmond. We have some wonderful leadership, wonderful imams and scholars who give wonderful khutbas on during Jummahs, during the month of Ramadan, during weekly family halakas, where these things are talked about actually. And again, reminders through the hadith and the Quran are the best way to get the Muslim community involved. I can again read another hadith, a saying of the Prophet about the importance and the benefit of helping someone with water. According to a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, while a man was walking, he felt thirsty, and he went down a well and drank water from it. On coming out of it, he saw a dog panting and eating mud because of excessive thirst. The man said, "This dog is suffering from the same problem as that of mine." So he went down to the well, filled his shoe with water, caught hold of it with his teeth, and climbed up and watered the dog. Allah thanked him for his good deed and blessed him with paradise. So just with this one act of feeding not even a human being, but quenching the thirst of an animal, God was so pleased with that man that he promised him paradise. And that paradise was, all this. We don't know how many sins this man may have committed or what kind of life he led. But all we know is that because of this one important good deed of quenching the thirst of a dog, of a panting dog, this man was promised paradise. So obviously, if we as Muslims can take the time out and put effort in to helping our neighbors, get clean and equitable access to drinking water. Imagine the results. Imagine how pleased God will be with us, and how beautiful our afterlife will be. So it's just, the reward for this is endless, I think. So these reminders are really important, and I know going through the mosques and programs like this will definitely help the community get more involved.
Yeah, I love that. I think an idea I was introduced to just last year was the idea of fighting for justice as sadqa or as sawab, which is not really for non-Muslim folks. That is kind of the word of a good deed or a charitable deed. And that's not really a framework of Islam that I grew up necessarily hearing. The idea that in this fight for justice and doing everything you can to help people and help communities to live a more just and to live in a more just and equitable world, that is in fact a form of worship. That is in fact a form of being a good Muslim. And I think making that connection is very important to get Muslim communities involved. And I think another kind of difficult aspect, like I mentioned earlier, is that so many Muslim communities are based off of immigrant communities or children of immigrant communities. And in that, it sometimes becomes difficult to integrate into these larger communities and fight for the problems that are happening in the larger community. Also, that goes into Islamophobia in the United States and always kind of feeling a little bit othered. So I think it's really helpful to think about justice as kind of the form that connects Muslims to these bigger communities and that does this sort of interfaith work in between them. Do you feel like there's a way to build an interfaith coalition around environmental justice, and how do you see that happening?
Well, I'm happy to say that a lot of the mosques, at least in Virginia, are becoming greener. They are trying to form green teams if they already haven't done so. They are becoming more environmentally aware, not only of the environmental issues that are affecting them, but other environmental issues as well. And of course, as you mentioned, social justice, that's pretty much the purpose of our life as a Muslim. We are here not only to bring justice to the world, but to maintain it and to make sure that it is, it is a fair and equitable world for everyone. So we have to start with our communities first. We have to look at what we can do here with our neighbors here in Richmond, and then kind of move out from there. So I am happy to say that the mosques are really catching on. Unfortunately, as you said, minority communities do have a lot going on. They are struggling in many aspects. So I think it's going to take them. We're a little bit behind, I would say, other faith groups, but I think we are trying to catch up. And of course, social justice is very, very important to us. Environmental justice, I think, is a new term, not only here in the United States, but even for our community. People are not very well informed about what exactly environmental justice is. And again, we have many examples of that here. Here, not only in the Richmond area, but in Virginia and here within the United States. So these are all aspects that we can tackle as a community through interfaith organizations, through organizations like Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. And I'm happy to say that a lot of the local mosques are supporting the IPL and other wonderful organizations. So I think we're on our way there. We're just taking baby steps.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And I think this reminds me of another story, which I was happily a part of this past year at my time at the University of Virginia. We have a little organization there called Muslims United. And this year we did our first sustainable iftar. It was a zero waste iftar effort, and we did it in collaboration with some community members in the Sufi Muslim community in Charlottesville. And that was such a beautiful event. It was also interfaith in that so many different people came. It wasn't just Muslims. And we had folks bring their own glass dishes and Tupperware, so that mitigated the styrofoam or plastic waste, but also the food waste because people could bring it back with them. And I remember thinking during that iftar, I was like, it's crazy that we've never thought of this before, especially during Ramadan when, we're constantly told to decrease our waste, be very mindful of the things that we're using, the food that we're eating, and to have that event. And then I remembered kind of what you brought up already, that actually people have thought of this before and that our faith kind of guides us to do these things. And sometimes we might get lost, we might get a little bit behind, but we know that that is kind of what our faith advocates for from the very beginning. So I love that you brought that up. And it's very inspiring to see so many of the local mosques and local Muslim organizations really taking that to heart, and doing all the hard work of working towards environmental justice in a world that isn't necessarily set up for that. So thank you. And I think that wraps up most of our questions for today. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add to our conversation?
Well, I wanted to thank you for bringing up the iftar that you just mentioned. That's wonderful. I think that I've read about it. I've heard of it. I haven't actually attended such an iftar, but I'm hoping that I will in the future. And with time we learn and we grow. I know one of the things that the IPL is offering is a film screening to educate our communities. One of the benefits we have all, I think, felt during this pandemic is kind of becoming more well-versed with Zoom and sharing platforms in this format. So I think that's one of the things that at least one of the local mosques is looking into. So I'm really excited about that, because that's going to be a wonderful educational opportunity for the Richmond community if the mosque is able to do that. The IPL is offering some of these movies, I think, during the month of July and August, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm excited that the mosque is thinking of sharing this platform with people. It's going to be very different from things that we've done in the past. We always used to gather together. And because of the pandemic, we were kind of lost, to be honest with you. We didn't know. We felt a sense of loss, but I guess one of the silver linings is that, you learn as human beings, you learn to do things in different ways to accomplish your goals. So the community has become more well-versed with online platforms. And I think that the mosque is going to possibly take advantage of this now. And hopefully, other churches and synagogues and other mosques in the area can also take advantage of some of these film screenings and environmental. It's a great way to educate your your community about the environment, about some of the injustices that are taking place. I recently I saw a post on Facebook by one of our delegates, Delegate Sam Rasool, that said, it showed 3 pipelines, and it said, instead of creating more fossil fuel pipelines, which a lot of the community members are not even happy about, why don't we add more water lines to Flint, Michigan, so that those people can have clean and safe drinking water? And to me, that was such a valid point. I hadn't really thought about that. But through communication and through education, we're all learning, and this is a great opportunity for our community to learn as well.
Yes, I completely agree. And I like that you brought up movie screening. VAIPL is also soon. And if you guys are interested in seeing communications about that screening or the rest of the stuff we do, you can always go to vaipl.org/join. And I know Alia also mentioned our green teams. We also have a partnership program that if you are interested with a partner organization or congregation, you can also go to vaipl.org/partners and become a partner with VAIPL. And we help faith communities to build this infrastructure to help coordinate green teams and push us to a more environmentally just world. And the last couple of things I quickly want to say as we're talking about water, I just wanted to share that right now VAIPL is also holding a campaign for water justice. You'll see a little link pop up that will give you the opportunity to check that out. That is a petition that you can sign to Virginia legislators advocating for water justice. And additionally, there's also a link that you can use to share your water story. So I know Alia mentioned one that was very moving, that talked about your relationship with water and why it felt so personal to have this access to water. So if anybody would be willing to share their story, we would love to hear your story as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to add that VAIPL next Thursday will be having a town hall discussing environmental justice. We'll have these wonderful speakers here and a bunch of faith and community leaders as well to talk about environmental and climate justice and how that relates to our communities, especially in creating jobs and caring for each other, and really hope that you guys can check that out. Other than that, I just wanted to say Jummah Mubarak to everybody, and early Eid Mubarak as well, and we hope to see you all again next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Hera. Take care.
Thank you.